Hello and welcome to Excel 3, part of a 5-part series of Excel courses. This is all about introducing formulae. We're going to have a look at creating basic formulae. We're going to use structured references. We're going to use different types of pasting. Then we're going to look at some specific formulae. These are all part of the MOS exams, Microsoft Office Specialist exams, which you may want to consider taking. This course does assume that you've been through our Excel 1 course and are familiar with the basic operations of Excel. If not, go and have a look at that first. There may be some resources nearby where this video is. If you're a York St John student, you can go onto Moodle, go into the student menu, go to digital training, go to digital training courses and Excel training courses. This is Excel 3. Double click that, download it, and then open it from your downloads. I will pause throughout this video to give you the chance to catch up and try things for yourself. We need to enable editing, and off we go. We're on sheet A here. This is a bit of revision if you've done our previous courses, how to do basic calculations. If we want to work out the subtotal here, we need to start a formula. All formulae start with an equal sign. I want to see what's in the box B5, so I'm going to click on that box. I could type a B and a 5 and that would be just as valid, but clicking on the box means look in that box to see what's in there. I want to do multiply. Multiply is on Shift and 8, it's the star. Just by the by, divide is on the same key as the question mark. And I want to multiply that by the cost. We end up with a formula that says B5 multiplied by C5. When you're entering formulae, you need to make sure that you either use the tick up on the top left here or press enter or tab on the keyboard. Don't try and click away, otherwise that C5 will turn into whatever cell you click on. If I press enter on that, that's done the calculation, and the whole point of Excel is if I change this 35 into 66 apples, press enter, Excel will recalculate. Now I want to copy that down. I could use copy and paste, or I could use the little bobble in the corner, the bottom right hand corner of the cell. Drag that down, and that's done the same thing for each row. Now it's worth noting this top calculation is B5 multiplied by C5 because we're in row 5. If I go to the next one down, Excel has automatically transposed that into B6 times C6, which is what we want. We want to work out each row independently. Now I want to add postage on. Fairly simple calculation, equals whatever my subtotal was, so that's D5, plus the postage amount up at the top here, B1. Now that works fine for my first cell. However, when I copy this down, it fails for the following cells. That's because, as well as transposing the cells from the row it's in, it's transposed the postage as well. Now this isn't helpful, but there is a way around that. So I'm going to press Escape to get out of that calculation and undo Control Z as a shortcut and undo again. Now I'm going to make that calculation again. I'm going to get equals my subtotal plus, now I've clicked on the same cell B1, but this time I need to add something in there to make it fixed, and the way Excel does that is by using the dollar sign. If I put dollars before the B and the 1, that means fixed, do not change. I'm going to do that with a cheat shortcut key, which is function key F4, and that cycles through different permutations. We want the one with both dollar symbols on. That means always refer to B1 and don't let it change even when you copy it. So now when I copy that down the column, it's correctly included the calculation including postage, looking at B1 only. Hasn't changed that as it goes down. Now, there are much better ways of doing this. This is what I would call old school Excel, with A's and B's and A1 and B7 and all that sort of thing. Formulae can be quite hard to read, so let's try and make things a bit easier. Let's give, for instance, the postage cell a name. If I click on B1 up here, up where it says B1, I can just click into that cell and give that a name. I'm going to call it postage. You can call it whatever you like. Press enter. That cell now is called postage. So if I remake the calculation, equals subtotal plus, when I click on the postage cell, it writes the word postage in, so it makes your formulae much easier to read. That's also a constant. It'll never change from that cell, even when you copy other cells around. And you can even start to type that. So if I just delete that, if I go plus and start typing postage, you can see that Excel manages to offer me the option. One of them's a formula, but the other one is our postage constant, shown by that little multi-grid symbol. If I double click that, it types the rest of the word in for me. If I press enter, that's given the correct calculation. If I copy it down, all the way down is going to say whatever the cell is plus postage. Much easier to read. A little diversion into brackets. Sometimes when Excel's calculating things for you, it needs a bit of help in understanding what to do first. If I was doing a calculation here, I wanted to say, I want how many of these items multiplied by the cost, and then I wanted to add on the delivery for each item. Now, if I was to put that formula into Excel, it's added the delivery on once, because Excel, like most mathematical operations, prioritises multiplication over addition and subtraction. And basically, if Excel's calculating things wrong, you need to give it some brackets to tell it what to do first. Brackets are always the first thing it does. So here, if I put brackets around the addition, I'm going to be adding £4.50 to every chair and then multiplying by however many chairs, and that's what I want my calculation to be. So that's going to give me what I think is the right answer. So brackets are always going to force things to happen first, and then multiplications and divisions, and then additions and subtractions. The best way to work in Excel, if you've done our previous course, Excel 2, is to work using tables. So let's make the calculations made above, but using tables, and I think you'll see how much easier it is. The first thing I'm going to do is make my data into a table. So I'm going to click anywhere in the data on the home menu, format as table, pick a colour, confirm it's got the right data, it's got headers, say OK. That is now an Excel table. When I make calculations with an Excel table, if I press the equals symbol and in the same row I click on quantity, it's actually writing in the word quantity. It's found in the header. If I do a multiply and then click on the cost, it's written the word cost in. Now it's really important you click on the same row that you're making the calculation in. You can't click on the header, You can't click on some other row, it's got to be the same row where you make the calculation. But you can see this is a lot easier to understand. When we come back to this later on, it's also going to be easier for us to pick up again what we're trying to do here. As soon as I press enter, Excel automatically copies it down all the rows. Excel tables are designed so that you do the same thing to each row. And here it's put the same thing in each box, it's put quantity times cost, so that there is an implied quantity times cost for this row. If we want to add postage in, we've got postage defined above, so we've got a name for that already. So if I go equals and I click on the subtotal, it's going to write in subtotal plus, and I'm going to type this time, POS, there's postage. I'm going to press the tab key and press the enter key, and it's going to copy that down all those rows. Moving on to sheet B. When you've done some calculations, so here we've got a multiplier and we're multiplying the two numbers together. If I copy those and paste those into this column here, as soon as I click paste, the calculation's broken. Because of the transposition we saw earlier, that calculation is the two cells adjacent to it, which works for the first column because it's got the number and the multiplier in, but for this one that's not being very helpful. The solution to that is to copy the material. If you want the answers in the column, you can use what's called paste values. So paste values is the paste menu with the little 1, 2, 3 attached to it. When you paste values, it's just like you've typed it in these rows here, and you've just got the answers there. If you wanted a dynamic link between the totals you've calculated on the left here, I copy those, and in this blue cell here, you might want to use paste link. Paste link has got the little chain link symbol on. That is making a link from that cell back to the original calculation cell and just saying, look at what's in that cell, give me the calculation. So it does depend on what you want to do. But a lot of the time, paste values or paste link might be what you actually want to do. One last one to try is transpose. Sometimes when you've got a set of cells, you copy those and you want them in the other direction, and that's exactly what transpose does. So I've copied these horizontal lying cells. If I go into paste and it's got two little arrows on it, transpose will take the horizontally arranged cells and arrange them vertically. If they were vertical originally, it would make them horizontal. Can be really useful sometimes. There are lots of other paste options to try, but those are the key ones. We're going to look now at range calculations. A range calculation means adding up a whole bunch of numbers in one go. A typical range calculation would be to add up all of these subtotals to get a grand total. Now this is a table, we can tell that if we click in it, the table design menu's at the top there. And if I wanted to add up all those numbers, I can go on the home menu and I can use the little sigma symbol to sum all of those numbers. So I'm going to put the result into this green box, it could go anywhere, and I'm going to click on the sigma. Now Excel, trying to be helpful, has highlighted all the cells above where I want the answer. Now I don't like that, and the reason I don't like that is because you could come along later and put anything into these cells. It also has gone to non-structured references. It's using the old style D2 to D8. Don't like that. So I'm going to tell it I want to add up just the items in the subtotal column here. I've carefully highlighted just the data, not the header. It's written in table 3, which is the name for this table, square brackets subtotal, which is the name for the column. And that means add up that column, and it doesn't matter how big or how small that column is, whatever that column is at the time, it will include that in the calculation. So I press enter on that. It's added up those to £43.10. So again, another thing from Excel 2, if I add another row into this calculation here, if I add oranges in here, and I'm going to put a quantity of 54 oranges, and each one is 37p, that recalculated the subtotal, added it into the table automatically, and because my calculation said always add up the whole of this column, even if that column's got one item longer, it's still going to be included, so that £63 includes the latest figure that's just been added on. A couple of other quick examples that you might want to try. Average, you can type it or you can go into the average box, which is a subpart of the sigma. And again, I'm going to make sure it's only averaging that table column there. If I want to do minimum, again, these are all part of the sigma menu. And again, I'm setting it to look just at that column there. And again, max, just to be complete, max, and then swoop down over just that column, press enter, and there we go. Let's move on to sheet D. We're going to do a few other calculations now. We've got some to look at here. Count, count A, count blank, and count if. So the first three are pretty straightforward. A count, I can use the sigma menu, and again I can highlight all the data I want to look at. We're using old school references here rather than structured references, but they'll still work. It's counting all the cells that have just a number in. Press enter. 7 of those cells have got numbers in. It won't count blanks, it won't count things with words in. If we want to do count A, we're going to have to type that ourselves. So let's start typing with an equals, count A, and then if you're typing it yourself, you need to make sure you open a bracket. So we've got count A and then a bracket. Now at this point, I would strongly suggest we use the FX box. The FX box pops up when you've got to the first bracket in a calculation and gives you some help. You can see here there's a little bit of help in the middle here. There's a link to the Microsoft website which has a lot of help and some worked examples, always useful. And then back in Excel we can click into one of these boxes and say what we want to count. Now count A, if we highlight those cells, you can see it's written in C2 colon C16. That means everything from C2 to C16. This FX box has put the closing bracket in for us, which is really helpful because if we miss that out, Excel might well complain. If we say OK to that, we've got count A, counts any cell here that's not empty. So the grey ones are empty, the other ones have all got stuff in. It doesn't matter what the stuff is, Excel's going to count those. Last one down here, count blank. And again, I'm going to have to type this one, count. By the time you've got to the B of blank, you can actually press the tab key and that's going to type in the rest of it and put the bracket in for you. It'll save you a little bit of work there. And again, you could just put the range in now, or you could open up the FX box. Again, you've got the help, and again I'm just going to tell it which cells to look at. C2 to C16, say OK, and it's found 3 blank cells. Last one we're going to look at on this page is count if, and this gets a bit more complicated. So we're going to go equals count. As soon as you got to count I, we've got 2 choices. Count ifs is a bit more complicated, takes multiple arguments. We're not going to look at that today. Count if, however, if I press tab, it'll type that in for me, put the bracket, and this is definitely worth bringing up the FX box for, because this has got 2 different things you need to put in. You need to get them in the right order. You need to get a comma in between them. You need a closing bracket. The FX box will help you with all of that. So the range is always going to be which cells are we interested in. So I'm interested in these cells here. My criteria is going to be something that it can say about the cells. So if I was to go for a nice simple one, I might go for plum. Okay, if I say OK to that, it's found 1 instance of plum. Now these are dynamic, so as soon as I click on a cell and type the word plum into it and press enter, you can see that that one's updated. Okay, and that will carry on monitoring that every time something changes on the sheet. Let's try another instance of that. I'm going to try it over here. I'll just colour the cell in bright yellow so I can see where I am. I'm going to go equals count if. I'm going to press the tab key on the keyboard and click the FX box. Again, the range, I'm going to look at some different cells now. I'm going to look at these numeric cells. So I'm highlighting just those numeric cells. And my criteria this time is going to be a bit more complicated. I'm going to say count up if it's greater than 50. So I've put a greater than sign and a 50. Say OK. And it's found 10 of these cells are greater than 50. And again, if we change one of the numbers, that calculation will change. Have a look at the formula itself, though. If I just double click to get back into that formula, you can type this yourself. You don't need to use the FX box, but that comma there, the double quotes around the greater than 50 and the bracket all need to be correct, otherwise Excel will probably complain. Okay, so that little FX box can certainly help you out with this. We're going to have a look at a little useful formula now that says if error. Now this is a very simple calculation we're doing up here. We're literally adding the 2 numbers together. So we're adding this number and that number, and they've literally called them this and that. When you're doing a calculation like that, sometimes some of your data might not be very useful. Someone might have typed literally the word rubbish in there. Someone might have created an error. And this other yellow one, Excel's still managing to cope with, even though technically it's not a number, it's text. But Excel's managing to cope with that one. But these other 2 have given us an error. And if we start to then use that in another calculation, then we're going to have an issue later on. So a very practical thing sometimes is to say, well, if there's an error, just maybe count it as a 0 or something like that. To do that, we're going to go equals, and we're going to go if error. And again, I'm going to press the tab key and it's going to type that bracket in for me. Let's call up the FX box. Which value are we looking at? We're looking at the one next to us. We're looking at the total that's been calculated. If that's a number, it's just going to give us that number. In this second box, I can decide what I want to return if there's a calculation problem. So if there's an error, for those 2 lines that are giving us an error message, I could just return 0. And again, I'm using the FX box and it's put the brackets in, the commas in. If I say OK, because it's a table, it's copied it all the way down. You can see these two calculations here, it's put 0 in. Now whether that's a good thing for you in the bigger scheme of things, you've got to decide. But if error is a useful little formula to just keep things behaving themselves and not creating issues later on. The last of our formulae is the if formula. So if looks at a condition and says yes or no, true or false, and if it's 1, it'll return one value, and if it's the other one, it'll return another value. So let's do a practical example here. I've got a list of sales made over the year. If it's bigger than 5,000, everyone's going to get a bonus. If it's smaller than 1,000, people are going to be fired. We're going to do those as two separate calculations. So equals if, and again press the tab key, press the FX box because it'll help you. Now logical test means something that's going to be true or false. So I want it to involve the sales cell there, and I want to see, well, is that bigger than 5,000? You're basically asking in the logical test, sales greater than 5,000, and Excel can then do that as a test, and we're going to do that all the way down. Is the number on the left bigger than 5,000? If it is, we're going to write the word bonus in because we want the word bonus to be shown. If it's not, we're going to just put a 0. Now we could put anything else in there. It could be a different word, it could be a number, it could be anything we like. The test must return true or false. So it's got to be something that Excel can actually test. It could be equals, greater than, less than, all sorts of things like that. You can see the cell we're in, Excel's had a look at it and it's saying, well, it's true. And it's saying, out of all of that, I'm going to write the word bonus in there. And given that they sold 8,723, that sounds good to me. Say OK. And again, because it's a table, it's copied it all the way down. It's only written the word bonus on lines where the one next to it is greater than 5,000, which is what we want. So this is a very typical use of if. Similar case, if I wanted to check in this column, equals, and then if, and then tab key to get the bracket, and then FX box up there to remind us what we're doing, we need to test something again. So I'm going to test the same column, the sales column, and see if it's less than 1,000. Actually, to be fair to them, I told them less than or equal to 1,000. So you can put things like less than and equal signs together to get less than or equal to, so everything from 1,000 down. If that is true, they are fired. And if they're not fired, well, I'm just going to kind of leave them to it. So I'm actually just going to put a dash in there. Say OK to that, and you can see all the way down the column it's checking the sales column. On this one it's checked the sales column, found that it's smaller than 1,000, so you'll be fired for that. If I change one of the numbers, these are all dynamic, so if I change one of these to 1,000, that was the upper limit to get fired. Everything's always dynamically looked at every time a number on the sheet changes. We've got more formulae coming up in our Excel 5 course, and then there's also our other courses for you to have a look at. More help is available from Digital Training. Send us an email, book a tutorial session, or see the help pages on our website.